Alright, hope everybody's doing well this morning. Today we are going to discuss the life and crimes of one Alan Morton Dershowitz and the people that attorney Alan Dershowitz has chosen to defend. People that he has chosen to defend as he hides behind being a staunch, pure advocate for the First Amendment and upholding the truest values of justice. In my opinion, he goes against the old adage that justice is blind. And the people he chooses to defend are very wealthy. Many of them are convicted rapists. Some of them have had allegations of sexual misconduct or rape or molestation brought against them, but were not convicted. Some of them were pedophiles. So who he chooses to defend is very questionable. So you have to look at the grand totality of everyone that he has chosen to defend, whether they are guilty or innocent. My belief is majority of them, if not all of them, were likely guilty in the crimes that they committed. But there's a pattern. Now, of course, people who are for Trump will overlook him being a very strong friend to Donald Trump and an advocate of his administration. And we'll get to Dershowitz's connections to Donald Trump and his connections to Jeffrey Epstein, which I've covered in a separate stream that connects Donald Trump and all his numerous connections to Jeffrey Epstein. So first I want to start with a brief overview article from the New Yorker called Alan Dershowitz, Devil's Advocate. To start, I guess I give an overview of many of the people who we're going to discuss today, because it's a pattern with Alan Dershowitz. If it's one or two things, you may overlook it, but when it becomes almost in every single case of him defending people who are, in my opinion, less than innocent, these people are not, then you start to determine, well, Alan Dershowitz must be a fixer for the world order. And he's doing it some for his own ego, some for his own financial gain, some, and it doesn't, surprise me. It appears that Alan Dershowitz does this because he wants to get over one on the law and him be the one to do so. A lie is a lie is a lie, Whoopi Goldberg said. It was May 2nd and she was on the set of The View, the daytime talk show that she co-hosts. The subject was Attorney General William Barr, who had argued that the special counsel Robert Mueller's report was not alarming as it seemed, endorsing Donald Trump's claim that there had been no collusion, no obstruction in the Russia case. Goldberg was incredulous. Our parents taught us if you lie, there are consequences, she said. When are consequences coming back? Her guest, the attorney Alan Dershowitz, offered an answer that combined legal analysis and political handicapping. They come back in November of 2020 when we all go to the polls and we vote against people that we think lied, he said. But it would be a terrible thing, he held up a finger for emphasis, to criminalize lies. Dershowitz is a frequent guest on shows like The View. For decades, he's been a frequent guest just about everywhere. If you're a television producer putting together a segment about a celebrated criminal case, Dershowitz is an ideal booking. Intellectually nimble and supremely confident, he is an emeritus professor at Harvard Law School, but also an occasional reader and subject of the tabloids. Over the years, he has written thousands of newspaper articles, magazine columns, and web posts. With the help from best research assistants, he has published 36 books, including The Best Defense, Chutzpah, and Sexual McCarthyism, that recount his cases and advance his opinions. In recent years, as Dershowitz approached the age of 80, his public presence faded a bit, but Trump's presidency has enabled a comeback. Dershowitz, a proponent of civil liberties, has made a speciality of defending people who do outrageous things, and Trump does outrageous things constantly. Media outlets looking for someone to argue Trump's side have been happy to have Dershowitz on there, explaining why the president's critics are putting politics before the law. In May, an edition of the Mueller report with an introduction by Dershowitz made the Times bestseller list. Sorry, it just cracks me up every time I hear that. On The View, Goldberg promised the audience that she hand out copies of the book after the taping, but she remained skeptical of Dershowitz's defense of Barr. He offered an explanation. Lying to Congress or the FBI was illegal, but misleading the public was not. The rule of law requires that we distinguish between sins and crimes, he said. There's no federal crime that says it's illegal to lie to the media. After a commercial, the segment began with images of several controversial Dershowitz clients. Klaus von Bülow, O.J. Simpson, Mike Tyson. The lineup include Jeffrey Epstein, a wealthy money manager who had been accused of sexually abusing underage girls. Starting in 2005, investigators had traced a sexual trafficking operation that extended from mansions in New York and Palm Beach to a Caribbean island, Little St. James, and that Epstein owned. As charges became public, press accounts enumerated his famous acquaintances, including Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, and Kevin Spacey, and described trips to the island. I'll give the New Yorker credit, at least they mentioned Bill Clinton as being a leftist rag, on his plane, the so-called Lolita Express. Despite sworn accounts from more than a dozen women, Dershowitz and his team secured a deal with Epstein pleaded guilty to minor charges and served only a brief sentence. On The View, why do I keep going back to The View? Which was hosted by 4 women, Dershowitz describes the experience as fraught. Okay, maybe that's why. It's a case that was very, very difficult and very, very painful for me because I saw real victims out there. I'm a very strong supporter of the Me Too movement. Oh, I'm sure you are, Alan Dershowitz. I'm sure you are. But he said an attorney is obliged to defend the rights of the accused. I think of myself like a doctor or a priest. Oh God. If they wheel Jeffrey Epstein, I'm sorry. If they wheel Jeffrey Epstein into the emergency ward, the doctor is going to take care of him. Dershowitz put it differently to me in one of the series of conversations this spring and summer. Every honest criminal lawyer would tell you that he defends the guilty and the innocent. One of the hosts, Abby Huntsman, pointed out, it does get more complicated for you in your personal life. In 2014, Virginia Roberts Giuffre, one of Epstein's victims, stated in a court filing that Epstein lent her out for sex to his friends, Dershowitz among them. Dershowitz has strenuously denied the allegations and maintained that Giuffre is a near pathological liar engineering an extortion plot. Giuffre's claims about him have never been directly tested in court. Instead, they have featured as side arguments in civil suits brought by others. 2 weeks before the taping, though, Giuffre had sued Dershowitz directly for defamation. On the air, Dershowitz said that he welcomed Giuffre's lawsuit. I have welcomed her coming on this show and accusing me face to face, he said. I've been falsely accused, he went on, more intently, so I'm welcoming this trial. He rubbed his hands together. This is the first opportunity I have to conclusively prove my innocence. Huntsman read a state from Giuffre. My abusers have sought to conceal their guilt behind a curtain of lies. My complaint calls for accounting to which I and the other victims are entitled. She's right, she's entitled to an accounting, Dershowitz said. I have, Alan, Goldberg said. The segment was running out of time. Invited the FBI to the trial. Alan, you got to stop. So that, Alan, you want me to give the book away. We got to give the book away. Dershowitz recovered his composure and smiled for the camera. Before the show cut to commercial, he got in the last word. My reputation is more important than any book. For decades, while Dershowitz was teaching at Harvard Law School and practicing as a criminal defense lawyer, he collected notes from his critics and posted the most vitriolic ones on his office door. You're a demon of evil. You're the best argument for abortion one could present. The notes signal to students that the law was an arena of principle if gleeful combat, a message reinforced by Dershowitz's habitual manner of genial belligerence. When he was attacked not just by note writers, but also by colleagues in the bar and by the occasional judge, it only confirmed the efficacy of what Dershowitz was called his confrontational legal style. He specializes in appellate law, working to overturn convictions on appeal, a branch of law that often requires dismantling the strategy and the arguments of other lawyers. Lawrence Tribe, a constitutional law expert and long-term associate of Dershowitz at Harvard, told me he revels in taking positions that ultimately are not just controversial, but also close to indefensible. Dershowitz describes his early life as an ideal preparation for conflict. He grew up in an Orthodox Jewish household in Borough Park, Brooklyn, and has written that he often got into fights with Italian kids in the neighborhood. Though I don't recall getting anything worse than a few cuts, several broken teeth, and one concussion. His mother, Claire Dershowitz, disputed this account, telling the Washington Post the only time his tooth was knocked out was when he played tennis. At yeshiva, he had a reputation as a wise guy, and as a principal recommended that he'd become something where you use your mouth but don't need much brains. His fellow students drafting the yearbook wrote that he had the mouth of Webster and a head of clay. At Brooklyn College, he began to apply himself, and he excelled. In 1959, he was admitted to Yale Law School. Before moving to New Haven, he married Sue Barlick, a young woman from Bayonne, New Jersey, whom he met during high school at a Jewish summer camp in the Catskills. She was 19 when they arrived in New Haven, and within 2 years they had a son. Sue's younger sister Marilyn dated Dershowitz's younger brother Nathan, and they often came to New Haven to visit. In 1963, Sue and Alan's second son was born. Dershowitz felt like an outsider at law school. He has written that he has gave his first presentation. His accent was openly laughed at, and he was non-preppy garb, which included Bermuda shorts with a Phi Beta Kappa key ostentatiously dangling from a pocket. He kept kosher, which meant he couldn't eat in the common dining room, and he didn't drive or work on the Sabbath. When he was being considered for the position of editor-in-chief of the Yale Law Journal, classmates asked if his religious observance would interfere with editorial responsibilities. He got the post anyway. During his second year, he applied to some 30 Wall Street law firms for a summer job. He was rejected by all of them, notably by Cravath, Swain, and Moore, where he badly wanted to work. In 1976, he represented an Italian-American lawyer who was suing the firm for religious and ethnic discrimination. Still, he made an impression at Yale. Dershowitz graduated at the top of his class and went on to serve as the clerk for two esteemed liberal judges, David Basil of the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and Arthur Goldberg, the Supreme Court Justice. In 1964, Dershowitz was hired as an assistant professor at Harvard Law School, and at 28 became a full professor. Stuart Eisenstadt, a student of his, would later become a policy advisor to President Jimmy Carter, told me he was the most exciting, most engaging professor I had at Harvard Law School. Dershowitz established himself as a civil libertarian, with a particular interest in the rights of the mentally ill. I wonder how many clients he took their cases that were mentally ill. But and a passionate First Amendment advocate, he defended neo-Nazi speech and pornography, starting with I Am Curious Yellow, an earnestly smutty Swedish film released in 1967. He joined the National Board of the American Civil Liberties Union and represented many litigants pro bono in cases involving challenges to censorship and to the death penalty. Nancy Gertner, a former federal judge who worked with Dershowitz in the late 70s and now teaches at Harvard Law School, told me he's very brilliant, just in the sense of speed in which his mind works and how prolific he is in churning out thoughts. From the beginning of his career, Gertner said, he had the imagination to see strategies and arguments other people don't. He also understood, before most of his peers did, the value of deploying the media. As he wrote in his 2013 memoir, Taking the Stand, we're going to read a quote from that in a little bit. If you don't have the law or legal facts on your side, argue your case in the court of public opinion. Dershowitz seemed to delight in publicity, even though he told the Friends that the aggressive and fast-talking know-it-all who appeared on television wasn't really him. Some members of the law school faculty were nonplussed by his media presence, his self-promotion, and his decision to take on cases while teaching. But Dershowitz needed advice, he said Judge Basil had given him. Don't follow in anyone's footsteps. Your feet are too big to follow in anyone else's print. Create your own life, Dershowitz once wrote. It was scary, but it fit my personality to a T. So that's more about his personal life. I want to get to when he starts representing people. Dershowitz's son, Elon, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He ended up divorcing Sue, or separating Sue, and they eventually divorced. Here we go. And this is important. In Judge Haskell Friedman's lengthy findings of fact, he wrote that Dershowitz's behavior towards Sue negatively affected the plaintiff's health to the extent that she required medical treatment and briefly some psychiatric therapy. Dershowitz denies mistreating her, and her son Elon said that he witnessed no improper treatment. Sue had been given provisional custody of the children, but Dershowitz, represented by his friend Silverglate, was seeking sole custody. He brought in a psychiatrist named Pierre Jeannette as an expert witness. At first, Jeannette recommended joint custody, But in the appearance a month later, he testified that he had changed his mind after listening to tapes of phone conversations between Dershowitz and Sue. Dershowitz has a long habit of recording phone calls, but says he has no recollection of taping these. Judge Friedman, too, was influenced by the tapes. In the conversations, Sue addressed Dershowitz in the most disparaging terms. According to the findings, she called him names over the telephone while the children listened. The judge noticed that Sue interfered with Dershowitz's visits with the children and harshly insulted Janine Baker, who had become Dershowitz's girlfriend. Friedman relied on the testimony from a number of witnesses, including Sue's sister Marilyn, whom by then was married to Dershowitz's brother, that Dershowitz would do more to help the children adjust to the divorce. Friedman acknowledged that Johannet had reversed his position, but that he wrote merely proved that he was truly objective witness. He awarded Dershowitz custody. The couple's dispute over alimony was no less fraught. Sue maintained that Dershowitz had substantially understated his income. In response, Dershowitz submitted 2 doctors' affidavits stating that he had developed hypertension. One recommended that he slow down from his present hectic professional pace. The judge decided that he should pay Sue a modest sum of 5 years and nothing thereafter. So it talks about him meeting a psychologist in Boston in 1982 named Carolyn Cohen. They later get married in 1990. Sue Barlak moved to New York and for several years worked as a research librarian for International Ladies Garment Workers Union. On New Year's Eve, 1983, she drowned in the East River in an apparent suicide. So then it goes on discussing Harry Reams, which I have some articles up about that we're going to discuss. Then it talks about him defending Klaus von Bülow, a Danish-British aristocrat who has been convicted of trying to kill his wife. The heiress Martha Sonny von Bülow. In 1982, he hired Dershowitz to appeal the conviction. Von Bülow, trained as a lawyer, had polished manners and a result of his marriage a vast fortune. Describing his first visit to the von Bülow residence, Dershowitz wrote, "Though I had passed many of the elegant mansions along Fifth Avenue on my way to and from the museums, I had never actually been inside one. There was a wood-paneled elevator, artworks in the hallway, and a sitting room with antique leather-bound books on the shelves. I felt it was a different world," he wrote. Von Bülow has been convicted of attempting to kill his wife by injecting her with insulin. Afterwards, she lapsed into a decades-long coma from which she never emerged. Dershowitz, leading a team of law students and young associates, devised an appellate argument built around the idea that Sonny may have caused her own coma through a prolonged addiction to pills and alcohol. In 1984, Dershowitz got the conviction reversed, and in a new trial, von Bülow was acquitted. Dershowitz wrote a book about the case, Reversal of Fortune, which was published in 1986. Nora Ephron, reviewing it for The Times, noted wirily, "Throughout the venerable tradition of defense lawyers who write books about themselves, Mr. Dershowitz made brilliant decisions no one could have ever been brave or intelligent enough to even consider." Dershowitz wrote a letter to the editor complaining that Ephron was deriding his work in order to help get a friend's book about the same case published. The friend published no such book, and Ephron replied wasn't even a friend. So there was a later movie made by it, even though the book sold poor. Here we go. Okay. Dershowitz was written frequently that defending the rights of the accused in rape cases is a crucial application of the presumption of innocence. And contrary to popular opinion, published in 1992, included a list of cases in which women acknowledged having made false accusations of rape, which that does happen. He argues it is precisely because rape is so serious a crime that falsely accusing someone of rape should be regarded as an extremely serious crime as well. Imagine yourself or a loved one being falsely accused of raping a woman. Yeah, it happened to a good friend of mine growing up. He broke up with his ex-girlfriend. He was 18, she was 17. He was dating someone else currently at that time. She came back over and they had sex, and she accused him of raping her. And he was going to trial and everything like that. And later she recanted and said that, she had not, and she'd provide evidence that, she had talked with friends that she was going to try to set him up. And she checked herself into a mental health rehabilitation place because she was having issues. And my friend still had to, the prosecutor was still going to take it to trial, even though she had, completely recanted and showed proof that, she tried to set him up. and he later had pled out and had to register as a sex offender. So it, it does happen. But I would argue that many of the people that Dershowitz claims did not do anything wrong, in fact, did things wrong. So he's, so it's very interesting that he's making that argument. However, the people that he's making the argument about, there's overwhelming preponderance of evidence that they are guilty or likely guilty of the crimes that they have been accused of. Some students thought that he strained logic in order to defend men. In Dershowitz's view, men who are accused of rape, there has got to be a defense. One female student from the 1991 class recalled, he had convoluted ways of thinking about how men could misinterpret lack of consent, and it weren't regulated to when we were speaking up about a rape case. Whenever we were on the syllabus, he'd bring it up. William Kennedy Smith, a nephew of John F. Kennedy, had recently been accused of raping a woman on the Kennedy family estate, and Dershowitz frequently spoke to the media about the case. Smith argued that the sex was consensual, and he was later acquitted. In class, according to a second female student who is now the chief executive of a nonprofit, he would talk about Smith and the women frolicking in the waves ripping off their clothes. Midway through the semester, a woman raised her hand and said, essentially, okay, enough rape examples. There are women in this class who have been raped. Can we move on to something else? His hair just caught on fire, Murph Wilcott, a male student who was in the class during the confrontation, recalled. He seemed to take it as a challenge to his authority, and he made it clear that he was going to teach what he wanted to teach. Dershowitz told The New Yorker, "There's a controversy in the class, and a very small number of students objected to the teaching. His intention, he said, was to play devil's advocate in order to challenge students' thinking. Dershowitz has not shied away from the provocative ideas about sex and law. And in 1997 op-ed in the Los Angeles Times, he argued that statutory rape laws writing, there must be criminal sections against sex with very young children, but it's doubtful whether such sections should apply to teenagers above the age of puberty, since voluntary sex is so common in their age group. He suggests that 15 was the reasonable age of consent, no matter how old the partner was." He was also argued against punishing men who hire prostitutes. In a 1985 article in the Gainesville Sun, Dershowitz proposed that a John, who occasionally seeks to taste the forbidden fruit of sex for hire, should not be arrested. The nonprofit executive recalled as discussing the idea in class. He said, prostitutes know what they're doing. They should be prosecuted. But you shouldn't ruin the John's life over that. Well, doesn't the John know what they're doing? The John... If I raised my hand to challenge that, I would have been signaling myself out as, God forbid, feminist. When people at Harvard objected to Dershowitz's views, he insisted the civil liberties were more important than the political sensitivities. In April 1991, Mary Jo Frung, a professor at New England Law, was murdered by a knife-wielding assailant near her house in Cambridge. The following March, the Harvard Law Review published an article that she's working on as she was killed, a postmodern feminist legal manifesto, which explained how law perpetuated the subjugation of women. Let's go down. It's talking about, okay, I'll go over the Epstein stuff in my own presentation. Talking about him having hawkish views on Israel. Of course, Dershowitz's latest book before the one he just wrote, the one that's coming out very soon, in defense of himself against the allegations that were made by Virginia Roberts Giuffre about him, was his book, In Defense of Israel, Alan Dershowitz's toughest case. Alright, the rest is about Epstein. So first we're going to start with his defense of Harry Reams. And so Alan Dershowitz has a long-standing in a long-standing manner defended pornography as completely as 100% free speech. I mean, even so far as William Ramsey played a clip of him defending bestiality pornography as being First Amendment. So to him, it's a First Amendment freedom of speech issue, and therefore it should be very open and very public, and there should be no shame. And he even mentions that in taking the stand. most Americans seem to understand that pornography, while offensive to some, is not provably harmful to others. That's why obscenity prosecutions have a relatively low rate of success. I've been involved in dozens of obscenity cases over the years, as you don't recall ever losing one. In addition to litigating many obscenity cases, I've written extensively on the subject. My article, Why Pornography, set out to determine whether there is an actual relationship between hardcore pornography and violence against women. The available evidence strongly suggests there is no correlation, to say nothing of causation, between the sexual explicitness of a film and the likelihood that it will induce violence by its viewer. Indeed, it is possible that there may be a negative correlation, since rape has gone down considerably in those societies in which sexually explicit films are pervasive, while rape has certainly not gone down in societies that persist in censoring films with explicit sex. I like to see those stats there, Dershowitz. I argue that, therefore, pornography is a red herring, and that its absence of compelling evidence, of which there is none, there is no causes actual harm behind vicariously offending those who. Okay, what about sexual trafficking? Women that are sexual trafficked and forced to perform in pornography. What about pornography breaking up family households and being a sin, sexual immorality and causing men and women to spend their time chasing ideals that are farther from the truth, and the sexual STDs that are spread throughout the pornography industry. So yeah, to say it has absolutely no harm besides just offending people's bullcrap. Those who choose not to see it, the government should get out of the business of censoring films and other media. Or what about, horrid forms of pornography that are abhorrent, like, bestiality, the harm that is done to animals, or even child pornography, which is the worst you can absolutely possibly get. Is he going to defend? Defends bestiality. Why not? I guess to him, if he's going to say the age of consent is 15, then a porn with a 15-year-old girl is perfectly fine. How Dershey? And also, there were allegations too that Linda Lovelace and the other guy that was involved in Deep Throat, I've forgotten his name, that they were coerced at gunpoint to make Deep Throat, which of course Harry Reams says that was impossible. That did not happen. Interesting enough, Harry Reams did kind of rejected his past and did come to Christ, supposedly. So if that's true, then I'm glad. But yeah, so that's just to set up just the beginning with Dershowitz of how he feels. So the first person, this is an interesting story. I had come across this, interestingly enough, when I was researching the finders. Toby Terrell, in his book The Game Caller, he mentions that he came across this guy that was the Swami, Kurt Ananda, and he talks about, and literally in The Game Caller, that he liked young boys. And so I went back and was like, okay, well, maybe because he talks about meeting him and finding him to be finding him to be an unscrupulous character and not liking him. Toby Terrell had mentioned. So I started doing some research because, of course, I'm researching the finders, obviously. So I'm going to look this guy up, right? Well, then it turns out that he, his real name's Keith Ham. He was being defended by Alan Morton Dershowitz. So I was like, whoa, like, I know I'd save this research eventually along, I was like, wait, what? Because again, the title of the string is, it's always Alan Dershowitz. And yeah, when you're researching this stuff and when you're coming across all this messed up stuff, you're gonna get, it's always Alan Morton Dershowitz, all right? He's the guy that's defending all of these horrific people, all right? So let's read about Ham. I'm going to reference him by his legal name, Ham, from now on. So Ham allegedly had a head injury and that's what he used to blame that. That they tried to use to blame that was the reason why he all of a sudden started having sex allegedly with young boys. Now, the writer of this article, who is editorial, is Hare Krishna. They say that's not the case. And what I've seen, there's the documentary that you can get. I got it and watched it. It was called Holy Cow Swami, and it's about Ham. Even the documentarian sat out and still was like, Ham. He didn't think Ham did anything wrong. And then by the end of the documentary, he was like, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the story of Ham is crazy, and Alan Dershowitz defended him. So it talks about, it's not hard to see what's happening. Ham has been having sex for the last 20 years with boys and men, and he's not going to stop now. The temple president left the community a few months later with his family. On March 16, 1987, the ISKCON, which is like the Hare Krishna Governor Body Commission, during their annual meeting at Mayapur, India, expelled Ham from the Society for Moral and Theological Deviations. They accused him of defying ISKCON's policies and claiming to be the sole spiritual heir to the Prabhupada movement. 13 members voted for the resolution, 2 abstained, and 1 member, Bhakta Swami, voted against the resolution. Ham then established his own organization, the Eternal Order of the League of Devotees Worldwide, and took several properties with him, including New Vrindaban, and his satellite preaching centers were excommunicated from ISKCON the following year in 1988. So that's when they broke communication with him. And then in 1990, the United States federal government indicted Ham on 5 counts of racketeering, 6 counts of mail fraud, and conspiracy to murder 2 dissident devotees, Charles St. Dennis and Steve Bryant. The government claimed that he illegally amassed a profit of more than $10.5 million over 4 years. It also charged that he ordered the killings because the victims had threatened to reveal his sexual abuse of minors. On March 29, 1991, Ham was convicted of 9 of the 11 charges. The jury failed to reach a verdict on the murder charges, but the Court of Appeals, convinced by the expert arguments of defense attorney Alan Morton Dershowitz, a criminal law professor at Harvard University who represented celebrated wealthy clients as Klaus Van Bulow, Mike Tyson, and O.J. Simpson, throughout the convictions, saying that child molesting evidence had unfairly prejudiced the jury against Ham, who was not charged with those crimes. Well, did Alan Morton Dershowitz do that? Yes, he did. It is right here. He is a defendant. He is the defense lawyer for Ham, and right here it talks about how it was thrown out because it prejudiced the jury. So Ham goes back to the to his new Vrindaban, the place that he had, his community, and he gets 1996. He gets back to retrial and he gets convicted. He admitted guilt to 1 count of racketeering. Was fined $250,000 and sentenced to a maximum prison term of 20 years. Also, on September 10th, 2000, the ISKCON Child Protection Office concluded a 17-month investigation and determined that Ham had molested 2 boys. He was prohibited from visiting any ISKCON properties for 5 years and offered conditions of reinstatement within ISKCON, conditions which he did not fulfill. So, yeah. I wonder if anybody ever asked Alan Dershowitz if he regrets defending Ham, because Ham was guilty. All right, now this one is okay. This one's a laugh. This one's a laugher. All right. This one is something that you can kind of laugh about because one of the quotes that comes from Jim Baker is so ludicrous. I don't even know if I could even say it. It's blasphemous. It's blasphemous to say it. But okay, so when I was researching Jim Baker for the Trump coins, guess who saved Jim Baker? Guess who got his sentence reduced? It was Alan Morton Dershowitz. I mean, Again, the title of this stream is It's Always Alan Dershowitz. It really is always Alan Dershowitz. And so it's like, the 6 degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon is the 6 degrees of separation of Alan Morton Dershowitz. If you're part of the world order and a swamp creature, you're probably tied to Alan Morton Dershowitz somehow. So, Jim Baker was accused of sexual misconduct of Jessica Hahn, and who worked for Baker. And so, of course, Baker paid her off. He was never convicted or taken over trial for that. But he was for fraud. And so Alan Dershowitz defended Baker. Jim Baker's 45th year sentence thrown out on appeal by Gene McNair. The judge who gave Jim Baker a 45-year prison term was influenced by his religious beliefs, said an appeals court that Thursday ordered the former television evangelist resentenced. The Fourth United States Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond upheld Baker's 1989 conviction on 24 counts of mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. But a 3-judge panel threw out the sentence because of remarks made by United States District Judge Robert D. Potter at the sentencing hearing in Charlotte, North Carolina. The court ordered that Baker be resentenced by a different judge. So that happened, right? Okay. And so Alan Morton Dershowitz ends up, joining. And then the sentence was overturned. And Baker was released. So yeah, Dershowitz, again, got the appeal. And of course, Jim Baker makes the most blasphemous quote I've ever seen. I sit here today, I always say 2 Jews, Alan Dershowitz and Jesus Christ. I sit here with a miracle. Pastor Jim Baker. Look, there were many, many, many Jewish people in the world. I don't think you can compare our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to Alan Morton Dershowitz. I mean, to me, that seems like blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. Now, I can't judge. It's not up to me. It's not up to me. It seems like Jim Baker broke the unforgivable sin here. All right? But I don't know. I don't know. That quote is just insane. Because Alan Dershowitz got Jim Baker off, so he'd have to spend almost a lifetime in prison. Alan Dershowitz and Jesus Christ. Alan Dershowitz is just as much as a savior to Jim Baker as Jesus Christ is. Uh-oh. Now this might get some people mad. Alan Dershowitz joins Julian Assange's defense team. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz has joined legal defense team for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. The announcement, which came via a tweeted press release Monday afternoon, took place ahead of the first showdown over WikiLeaks in the United States courtroom, a hearing set for Tuesday in Alexandria, Virginia. This is back 2011. On a request the Justice Department made for information about Twitter's accounts maintained by 3 WikiLeaks supporters. I'm serving as a legal consultant to them on American aspects of the issue, which at the moment is limited to the efforts to get this material, Dershowitz told me. Asked why he got involved in the matter, Dershowitz says he sees an important freedoms at stake at the battle and rejects the claims by government officials that Assange shouldn't be considered as a journalist. That's true. He's a journalist. Assange is a journalist. He's a new kind of journalist. He represents the newest wave of journalism. I'm currently in this case because I believe that to protect the First Amendment, we need to protect new electronic media vigorously. Records about accounts maintained Assange and WikiLeaks itself were requested in the same court order directed to Twitter. But Assange is not fighting those requests, according to WikiLeaks' press statement. Mr. Assange will not be intervening in the action against Twitter because an Australian who has committed no criminal act on U.S. territory, he claims American courts have no jurisdiction over him. Really said. The head of his UK legal team, Jeffrey Robertson, QC, has brought in Alan Dershowitz, a distinguished Harvard law professor, as part of the lead team to advise the U.S. Attorney General actions. Legal analysis of the decision by Assange not to join in the legal challenge to the Twitter order was likely to preserve Assange's claims and a lack of jurisdiction if the United States does bring criminal charges in the future. I wonder if Alan Dershowitz is going to represent Assange if he gets extradited here to stand trial. Trust the plan, I guess. That would be interesting. Assange has not been publicly charged with any crime in the United States. He is currently in English fighting extradition to Sweden in connection with sexual assault investigation. Which, anybody out there who thinks that Assange didn't do anything, William Ramsey has a really good interview. I forgot the guy's name. Where they actually built a pretty good case that Assange may have committed sexual assault. And I don't really think Assange is quote-unquote our guy. And everybody asks, well, everybody's persecuting him. Johnny's sitting in prison. Well, he has to be. He grew up in the Australian cult The Family. CIA, connections. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Alan Dershowitz is defending him. Assange has not been publicly charged with a crime in the United States. He is currently in England fighting extradition to Sweden in connection with a sexual assault investigation. Dershowitz made his reputation as a civil libertarian and criminal defense lawyer. In recent years, he has made some trouble in liberal circles through his strident defense of Israel and his proposals for torture warrants as part of the war on terror. I don't know, maybe Alan Dershowitz is doing the right thing by defending Assange. I don't know, maybe. Maybe he is. I mean, everybody in the alternative media loves Assange. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's the one time Alan Dershowitz did what was right. I don't know. Roman Polanski's latest plea to close rape case falls on deaf ears. Oscar-winning director Roman Polanski remains a fugitive from American justice despite a 133-page petition filed last week in Los Angeles Superior Court by famed defense attorney Alan Dershowitz. He wrote a 133-page petition to the Los Angeles Superior Court that Roman Polanski did not do anything wrong. That he did not drug or rape Samantha Gailey. And the reason why he fled the United States. That Polanski is a good man. Upstanding character. 133 pages. Man, I tell you what, Dershowitz is busy. The motion further argued that Judge Peter Espinoza prejudiced the original case with his notion of having Polanski cool his heels in jail. For a while, if he returns to the United States, prior rulings have stated the filmmaker must appear to court to have the arguments heard. Superior Court James Brandlin, who was having none of it, in a 9-page ruling Tuesday, he turned down Dershowitz's request that the 1977 case be dropped according to the court's sports spokeswoman today. That leaves the director of Chinatown, Rosemary's Baby, and The Pianist. Most recently, Venus in Fear. Still a wanted man, and conviction going back 37 years. He was charged with drugging and raping 13-year-old Samantha Gailey. Polanski ultimately pled guilty to having unlawful intercourse with a minor. Before sentencing, he fled the United States in a likely prison stretch. But of course, Alan Dershowitz, Samantha Gailey was probably in puberty. It's alright. From his home in France, he fought extradition from Europe. Repeated since, most recently in a prolonged case in 2009 and 2010, back when Steve Cooley was still in Los Angeles County DA. The warrant for Polanski's arrest will remain in effect as a result for the latest ruling. Brandlin is a judge who insisted last spring that music star Chris Brown appear in court in his orange prison jumpsuit to face charges of violating his probation. In October, he praised the singer for appearing and said he's doing well and had been following his probation rules. See this pattern? You see this pattern? This pattern of Dershowitz? Of representing the worst? The worst. It's just one after another. So, of course, Alan Dershowitz represented Jeffrey Epstein, and Alan Dershowitz is friends to Donald Trump and was friends with Roy Cohn. I covered this in my PowerPoint presentation, Trump's numerous connections to Epstein. I'm not going to read this in its entirety. You can go back and watch that presentation that I did with a friend of mine, the Cynic. Nonetheless, I will briefly go over a few points in this. So Alan Dershowitz, he's a law school graduate, Yale Law School graduate, which you already knew, was friends with Roy Cohn and would go to his parties. Actually believed that he met Trump at these parties, and he's known him longer than the early to mid-1990s. And showed up as a character witness against Roy Cohn's disbarment. So did Donald Trump. The story of Dershowitz's own reversal of fortune began on the vineyard in the summer of 1996. A family friend, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, he said, invited him to a party for her husband, Lord Evelyn de Rothschild, where she introduced him to Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not going to say that the Rothschilds are not powerful. They are. They're very powerful. But as I stated many times beforehand, what about the elite people that we may never know, what they call the true breakaway civilization, the ones that don't have the light shined on them? I wonder really truly who's at the top. Not saying that the Rothschilds ain't one of the ones that are near the top or have a lot of power. They do. But I've always just wondered that. She said, I have this friend. He really would like to meet you, Dershowitz said. He said he found Epstein enthralling. He appeared to be more than just another rich guy. Like Dershowitz, Epstein was from Brooklyn, and he liked to discuss big ideas. He considered himself a man of science. He was feisty. He was utterly politically incorrect, Dershowitz says. He was interesting to be with. Soon after their first meeting, Dershowitz recalled Epstein called him up and said that another friend of his, the billionaire Leslie Wexner, who I believe is actually higher in the Epstein operation. You know, Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were lower-level players. Ghislaine was probably higher than Epstein. Wexner was higher than both of them. He also gave Jeffrey Epstein his New York City mansion for $1. That was supposedly rigged up with video cameras as a brownstone operation. Wexner, who owned apparel brands, The Limited and Victoria's Secret, and The Limited too, by the way, which sells lingerie for children. Tight and mysterious relationship with Epstein, who managed his money. Instead of presents, Wexner had asked each of his guests to bring the smartest person he or she had met that year. Epstein picked Dershowitz. He flew him out to Ohio on a private jet. Who was at the birthday party, Dershowitz said? Shimon Peres, Senator John Glenn, and the then owner of Sotheby's. The social connection deepened when Epstein started hanging around Harvard. Epstein opened an office near the school, gave it millions, and hosted seminars that brought together academics from different disciplines. So it's talking about, Dershowitz, being around Epstein, visiting his mansions many times. Talk about how Dershowitz supposedly met Trump. Dershowitz says he met Donald Trump at a Patriots game and Robert Kraft. Robert Kraft, Donald Trump, Alan Dershowitz. Robert Kraft is a member of Mar-a-Lago. Robert Kraft would also be implicated in the sex scandal with the Chinese-owned day spa. So this connection between all three of them, again, for people who still trust the plan and wear their MAGA hats, there are numerous connections between Trump and the World Order Nexus. So there's a different story that Alan Dershowitz may have met Trump, was that this teddy bear that was given to Leona Helmsley, the hotel magnate who Dershowitz had represented, and who also got off. And so, my guess is actually that Alan Dershowitz, because it's weird because, you have these two accounts of when Alan Dershowitz met Trump. My guess is actually both of these accounts are wrong and that he knew Trump from Roy Cohn and Trump's father, Fred Trump, would be my guess. Alan Dershowitz is a lifelong Democrat and Hillary Clinton donor and supporter, but 2016 election started supporting Donald Trump. Over the years, Alan Dershowitz has spent time with Trump at Mar-a-Lago as a guest of New England Patriots owner and Trump pal Robert Kraft, as well as been at the White House on multiple occasions. Alan Dershowitz had dinner with Donald Trump at the White House from April 10th, 2018, April 11th, 2018, discussing the Mueller investigation. He pulled me aside, Dershowitz recalled, and said, I have a message for you to give to Bibi Netanyahu. This talks about Alan Dershowitz convinced Donald Trump to pardon Shalom Rabishigan. Supposedly, Rabishigan was running just a disgusting slaughterhouse. And there's a lot of illegal aliens working for him in horrid working conditions. And supposedly, even possibly a methamphetamine laboratory was on the premises. So yeah, I mean, there's even more from this. I mean, here recently, Alan Dershowitz was seen with Trump over Trump signing the executive order that federal funding will be taken away from schools that don't do anything to curtail anti-Semitism from colleges. And he's saying this is the biggest action that has been taken against anti-Semitism in the past 2,000 years. Well, what two things happened in the past 2,000 years that Alan Morton Dershowitz could have been alluding to? One would be the murder and resurrection of Christ that started Christianity, and the fall of the Second Temple. So, but yeah, many connections between Alan Dershowitz, Jeffrey Epstein, and Donald Trump. I'll put a link in the show notes if anybody wants to cover that part. And finally, our last article. Harvard Law professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz joins Weinstein's defense team in class action suit. Harvard Law School professor emeritus Alan Morton Dershowitz has joined Harvard Weinstein's legal defense team to consult on constitutional cases, according to February 15th court filing. Dershowitz has granted permission to consult for Weinstein's defense on a pro hoc vice basis, which allows lawyers to participate in a case outside of their legal jurisdiction so long as they provide a certificate of good standing for the areas in which they are licensed to practice. The suit Dershowitz is involved in is a class action lawsuit against Weinstein's former production companies, the Weinstein Company and Miramax, the Walt Disney Company, and Weinstein himself, among others. The lawsuit alleges Weinstein violated federal sex trafficking laws. The former film producer faces separate criminal charges for sexual assault from the two women in the Manhattan case that stem from accusations that he raped one woman and forcibly performed oral sex on another. Winthrop House faculty Dean Ronald S. Sullivan Jr., also a Harvard Law School professor, joined Weinstein's legal team in a criminal case last month, drawing backlash from the students and calls for him to step down from his faculty deanship. The filings first mentioned by New York Daily reporter Stephen Brown on the Twitter indicate Dershowitz will be consulting on some email exchanges relevant to the case. I was retained by defendant Harvey Weinstein's counsel to consult with them regarding constitutional issues concerning certain email correspondence, Dershowitz court filings read. Dershowitz said in an interview that the defense counsel retained him in an official capacity after plaintiffs in the case moved to block Weinstein from releasing certain email correspondence between him and his accusers. Weinstein has not hired me. I was retained by his original lawyer, Ben Brofman, to consult with Brofman on the constitutional issue around the case, Dershowitz said. It's an issue I've litigated in a number of contexts, and one I feel very strongly about. And as he should be getting all the tapes, all the information, and let the judge, the jury, and the public decide. Dershowitz said he's working for Weinstein's defense team because he believes providing due process regardless of whom is accused of a crime. Does he even weigh whether or not the person's guilty or not before he takes I guess. I am a criminal defense lawyer. My role is to help anybody who's charged with a crime, no matter how serious, no matter how heinous, no matter how unpopular, Dershowitz said. I've represented O.J. Simpson, Mike Milken, Anatoly Sharansky, and Bill Clinton. Wait, when did Alan Dershowitz represent Bill Clinton? I looked. I don't. What? When? For what? For Monica Lewinsky? Okay. That I've never came. Has anybody in chat? You ever come across Alan Dershowitz representing Bill Clinton? I've never heard that. I've never seen that. Again, I mean that would be another person. He represented of horrid moral character. Just another person. I guess no one in the chat knew that. I did not know that either. I mean, I briefly looked, and I don't see... I mean, maybe I type in Monica Lewinsky, maybe? Or impeachment? Was that it? Okay, I guess... I guess he's talking about his book that he wrote, Sexual McCarthyism, Clinton Star, and the Emerging Constitutional Crisis in 1998, defending. But again, that's not representing. Was he legal counsel for Bill Clinton during the impeachment hearings and later the trial in the Senate? Huh. I've never heard that. That's news to me. That's really interesting. Now I'm gonna have to read this book to see if he did. Ugh, I can't reading Alan Dershowitz. But yeah, I mean that's something. That is something. Okay, so he represents Clinton. There are rumors that Alan Morton Dershowitz is going to join the representation of impeachment for Trump. If that happens, boy, I tell you what, those MAGA... oh, man, I tell you guys are supporting Trump. The day that happens, it's just too juicy. It's just too juicy for it to happen. I mean, he's already provided counsel to him, but he just hasn't joined Trump's team with Rudy Giuliani. But he has, provided counsel to him about the Mueller report and about impeachment. But that's, Bill Clinton. Add Bill Clinton to the list. Add Bill Clinton to the list. It's his own words. I can't find really much about it, but he said it himself. Add to the list. Of course, I'm going to accept the role in helping to provide due process and constitutional protections to anyone charged with a crime. Dershowitz also defended Sullivan's decision to represent Weinstein in the Manhattan criminal proceedings. He said Sullivan was doing the right thing, and the students protesting should be ashamed of themselves. They should go back and read the Constitution to be ashamed of themselves, Dershowitz said. The one thing I will never, ever be pressured by students. Following Sullivan's decision to join Weinstein's legal team, Sullivan sent an email to students addressing criticisms of his participation in the case. Faculty of Arts and Sciences Dean Claudine Gay said in an interview that the way Sullivan handled student concerns was insufficient. So, I have proven that Alan Dershowitz chooses to represent people of abhorrent character. Bill Clinton, Ham, Jim Baker, Roman Polanski, Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Mike Tyson, O.J. Simpson. That's not even getting to, the fraud cases or him representing, Patty Hearst, which, I'll do a separate video on those. This is more of people that I wanted to show that he represents who are alleged rapists or people who've done sexual misconduct. Allegedly, people have been convicting of rape or sexual misconduct, pedophiles, just the whole gamut that Alan Dershowitz represents. And he represents proudly that he is doing the best that he possibly can do. That it's a badge of honor to him. Who will defend the people that will not be defended? Well, I hate to tell him, but all these people were rich, and I'm pretty sure it might just be me that they could have found someone else to defend them other than him. All right? But it is what it is. So, I hope everyone found this presentation informative. Tomorrow night I will be having Greg McCarran on. Till next time, always read the documents.